So I read a lot of horror literature. It's like all I do when I'm not making videos. A lot of what I talk about on this channel is horror literature and why I think it's so amazing. As someone who grew up on internet horror, I think there's something so special about sitting down and reading a full-length novel about something scary. I love stretching my brain and learning to understand the way that any given author writes. I've read a ton of Clive Barker's work this year, and he's one of my absolute favorites now. His descriptions of horrific imagery are both beautiful and brutal while also being pretty easy to understand. He can make a giant possessed pig sound elegant and frightening. I love analyzing the prose of everything that I read. I think that a great author will make every single paragraph into its own little work of art. That's what I look for in great horror literature. So today I will be talking about Jeff the Killer. Yes, the famous creepypasta that has aged like spoiled milk. This story scared me so much when I first read it my freshman year of high school, and I have no idea why. I'm certainly not the first person to make a video about Jeff the Killer. Jenny Nicholson has my absolute favorite video on the story and just creepypasta in general. But I'm going to be going through this story with a fine-toothed comb today. Instead of simply pointing out the nonsensical story and bizarre character writing, I'll be looking at the actual writing itself. Just the way that the sentences are put together and how this story suffers from a problem that so many creepypastas fall into. When you think you have a really good idea on your hands, it can be very tempting to just write a story that beelines straight to the big reveal or the explosive ending. The issue is that there is a lot of character work and setup that should ideally come before that big reveal, and if you skimp out on all that stuff, the whole thing just ends up not working. So I'm going to be going through the story in excruciating detail and stopping whenever we hit a moment of weird writing. If you're looking for somebody just to read the story out to you straight with no pauses, and this would not be the video for you. I really want to explain what makes this story so weird but also so unbelievably funny to me now that I'm a little older and I can recognize some of the pitfalls of amateur writing. And I'm hoping that by discussing in finer detail some of the mistakes in the writing, any aspiring horror authors, especially some of my younger viewers, can learn a thing or two about how to put a good story together. This video is in no way intended to be mean-spirited or make fun of the original author. I'm sure they were pretty young when they wrote this, and it isn't their fault that it blew up as much as it did. If the stories that I wrote when I was in middle school or even early high school were on the internet, we would all be cringing and laughing at them. That's just the way it goes. But I also think it's important to understand why this story has the reputation that it has. There is a reason that it's memed on so much, and I want to explain why that is in greater detail. Again, I don't want this video to seem like I'm just being super negative. That's not my intention at all. This story is clearly a starting off point for a new author. And I have so much respect for anyone who puts their work out on the internet for everyone to see. It's an incredibly admirable thing to do, even if it's not your best work. I have old videos on this channel that suck, but I leave them up so I can remember where I started. And I'm sure I'll look back and cringe at this video a few years from now. Remember to subscribe if you haven't yet. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subs by the end of 2025. I talk about horror literature and internet horror on this channel and would love to have you here in the community. But enough intro, let's get into my literary analysis of Jeff the Killer. So we have to address the picture. This story was written to go along with the picture. No one really knows where that image originally came from, but it came before this story. And I know that I am a 26-year-old man and that I've watched a ton of obscene and horrifying movies and TV shows and internet videos, but the picture still creeps me out. I'm not going to put it in this video because it legitimately scares me and I don't really know why. I can see that it's an obvious Photoshop job with like smears and everything. I can see that it looks edgy and like it's trying way too hard to be scary, but something in my brain can't stop sending me into survival mode when I see the picture. I stared at it for like 3 full minutes when I started writing this video to try to desensitize myself to it, and I just can't do it. If there's a cure for this irrational fear, then let me know. But moving past the picture, let's get into the first paragraph. We start with an excerpt from a local newspaper that says, "Ominous unknown killer is still at large." Now, I told you at the top of this video that I would be nitpicking and stopping a lot, so I have to point out that the word ominous sounds very out of place for this newspaper headline. It really feels like it should say infamous, and it's weird to describe an unknown killer as ominous because typically that word refers to something like ever present and looming over you. We then move into the article, which tells us about a young boy that survived one of the ominous unknown killer's attacks. We aren't told how old the boy is, which is a little strange. Throughout the entire story, the author will switch between being very vague and then overly descriptive. We'll talk about that a bit more when we get to Jeff's origin story. But we also have to address the strange way that this story is structured. We start with the account of Jeff attacking a young boy, and then we go back to his origin story. I think this entire thing would be a lot better if there was no origin story. I think the image is creepy enough that if we got like a series of freaky encounters with the killer, we would be set. Like, imagine a story that is structured in a way where a small town is being terrorized by a killer, and we hear all about the threatening and terrible things he has done to people in the town. We could establish him as a serious threat, like someone that can't be stopped or reasoned with. Then we could end with one of his victims managing to snap a picture of him. And that way we've given context to the image, which is something that we never really get in the story. I think that it could be pretty freaky, and that structure would suit the internet urban legend genre pretty well. Because I'm going to level with you. If you want to write a story about an unhinged killer that we should all be terrified of, you probably shouldn't start with that killer failing to kill a child. The only information that we have of Jeff is that he looks a little scary and that he's able to be successfully fended off by a literal kid who is probably around 9 or 10 years old. But let's look at the way this child is written. I had a bad dream and I woke up in the middle of the night, says the boy. I saw that for some reason the window was open, even though I remember it being closed before I went to bed. I got up and shut it once more. Afterwards, I simply crawled under my covers and tried to get back to sleep. Is it just me, or does this kid start talking weirdly formally, like out of nowhere? The first two sentences are fine, they sound normal. I would maybe have written the kid as like talking maybe a little bit more childlike, but the kid could be older and talk completely normal. But then he says that he got up and shut it once more. I don't use the term once more in my regular vocabulary unless I'm trying to be funny or being like overly formal. And all I can think of is Mal'Ganis in the culling mission of the human campaign of Warcraft 3. Now, that's a reference that like literally nobody who's watching this video will recognize, but I can only hear, I live once more when I think of that phrase. Then the kid says that I simply crawled under my covers and tried to get back to sleep. Again, maybe it's just a me thing, but the usage of the word simply sounds overly formal. That's when I had a strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked up and nearly jumped out of my bed. There, in the little ray of light, illuminating from behind my curtains, were a pair of 2 eyes. This is like the scene in Frankenstein where it describes the monster looking through the curtains, only this time it's Jeff the killer. Again, it sounds a little too formal, but then we get a great line. A pair of 2 eyes. Now, I recognize that this is supposed to be the eyewitness account of a child and that children make mistakes when speaking, but this child has already been established as some sort of fancy private school kid who speaks very formally. So I don't know if I can look past the redundancy of a pair of 2 eyes, unless Jeff the killer has 4 eyes, but again, that image is burned into my mind and I can safely say that he doesn't. These weren't regular eyes, they were dark, ominous eyes. They were bordered in black and just plain out terrified me. That's when I saw his mouth, a long, horrendous smile that made every hair in my body stand up. Another use of the word ominous, but this time the context is more appropriate, but it feels out of place since it comes so soon after the first use of the word. Typically, authors will try to vary their descriptive language so as not to exhaust the use of one particular adjective. It's easy to overlook when you're reading, but it sticks out like a sore thumb when an author uses the same adjective in quick succession. This isn't a universal rule. There are stories that will use a particular descriptive word or phrase over and over again for dramatic effect. Edgar Allan Poe does this in his poems from time to time. But there isn't enough intent that we've been shown in the writing of Jeff the Killer to feel like the author is using a stylistic choice here. Also, I have another small gripe with that last paragraph. The kid says, that's when I saw his mouth, but there is no reference or trigger that would make that phrasing seem natural. It should probably read, and then I saw his mouth. The figure stood there, watching me. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he said it. A simple phrase, but said in a way only a madman could speak. He said, go to sleep. I let out a scream. That's what sent him at me. He pulled up a knife, aiming at my heart. He jumped on top of my bed. I fought him back. I kicked, I punched, I rolled around trying to knock him off of me. Another small nitpick, but he jumped on top of my bed makes it sound like he's standing on the bed, when the description of the struggle suggests that it should be worded, he jumped on top of me. Also, I think the fact that Jeff supposedly aimed his knife at the kid's heart lends itself to the idea that whoever wrote this was younger. It's kind of an odd way to describe an attack. If a madman attacked a child in their bed and there was a struggle, you would expect the child to be cut up all over the place. That's pretty standard with any knife fight. I think it would be a lot more effective if Jeff started slashing wildly or maybe even stabbed the kid in like the leg in order to draw the whole thing out. That would fit his character more. Because we're going to find out later that Jeff is like an actually insane person. He isn't like cool or calculating, no matter how much teen romance fan fiction tries to make him that way. So I wish that insanity was reflected in the only encounter we get in the story where Jeff is a fully formed serial killer that is sneaking into houses and attacking strangers. That's when my dad busted in. The man threw the knife. It went into my dad's shoulder. the man probably would have finished him off if one of the neighbors hadn't alerted the police. Again, Jeff isn't really that threatening when the first thing we see him do is fail to kill a child and then throw a knife into his dad's shoulder. He couldn't even get him in the heart. Maybe Jeff just doesn't know where the heart is. He seems to be really bad at stabbing people in the heart. But this isn't the last time that Jeff will cause some shenanigans with someone's heart. They drove into the parking lot and ran towards the door. The man turned and ran down the hallway. I heard a smash, like glass breaking. As I came out of my room, I saw the window that was pointing towards the back of my house was broken. It's a little strange to specify that the smashing sound sounded like glass breaking, only to immediately follow that up with the back window being obviously smashed. Also, if this is a house, why are the police parking in the parking lot? Another nitpick, but I'm pretty sure the author meant driveway. I looked out it to see him vanish in the distance. Awkward phrasing again. I looked out it is weird. I can tell you one thing, I will never forget that face, those cold, evil eyes, and that psychotic smile. They will never leave my head. I probably don't need to mention this, but the punctuation is all over the place. So many commas in weird places, and then just semicolons all over the place as well. Police are still on the look for this man. If you see anyone that fits the description in this story, please contact your local police department. Maybe just slightly disrespectful to refer to a child's encounter with a serial killer that left his dad with a knife in his shoulder as a story, but maybe that's just me. Now we get to the bulk of the story, the origin of Jeff the Killer, and my script here says I'll try to move through this section a little faster, because when I wrote this section of the script, I thought this video would be a lot shorter than it was, so we're not going to move that much faster through the rest of the thing. It's going to be a lot of stopping and looking at some weird phrasing, because there's a lot of it coming up. Jeff and his family had moved into a new neighborhood. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, and they thought it would be best to live in one of those fancy neighborhoods. Jeff and his little brother Lou couldn't complain though. A new, better house. What was not to love? As they were getting unpacked, one of their neighbors came by. I actually have nothing to say about this paragraph. It's pretty standard and it sets the scene for the story pretty well, but also notice the lack of descriptive language going forward. "Hello," she said. "I'm Barbara. I live across the street from you. Well, I just wanted to introduce myself and introduce my son." She turns around and calls her son over. "Billy, these are our new neighbors." Billy said hi and ran back to play in his yard. More nitpicks here. Keeping a consistent tense is something that I personally struggle with when writing scripts and like recaps of stories. Barbara's mom said something and then she turns around and calls and then Billy said something again. Technically it's neater to have all those tenses agree with each other, but it's not really like a super strict hard and fast rule, just something to watch out for going forward. "Well," said Jeff's mom, "I'm Margaret and this is my husband Peter and my two sons Jeff and Lou." They introduced themselves, and Barbara invited them over to her son's birthday. Jeff and his brother were about to object when their mother said that they would love to. When Jeff and his family were done packing, Jeff went up to his room. "Mom, why would you invite us to some kid's party? If you haven't noticed, I'm not some dumb kid." I was going to critique the dialogue here, but as someone who used to work with middle schoolers, this is actually shockingly accurate. "Jeff," said his mother, "we just moved here. We should show that we want to spend time with our neighbors. Now, we're going to that party, and that's final." The whole party element of the story is really strange to me. It does come back around near the end of the story, but it's such a weird plot device. It feels like it both is and isn't a big deal. Something that I love in literature is when something that is not a big deal is treated like the biggest thing in someone's life. I think that trope captures anxiety really well. I also like when stories do the opposite thing. You kind of build up to something that should be massive, and then it ends up being not as big of a deal as you thought it would. I think that can be very satisfying as well. My favorite book ever is To Kill a Mockingbird, and in that novel, there is a trial that really feels like it's what the entire story has been leading up to, and in most stories that would be the case. So you spend the first half of the book getting the context that you need for the trial and the people in the town and how everyone feels about the situation, and then the trial happens, and then it ends in kind of a muted, quiet way. And then the book just keeps going and we are reminded that the world still goes on after everything that we've seen. So while I'm not sure if the party aspect of this story was necessary, I do think it could have been interesting if this party became a serious point of contention between Jeff and his family. We see him get mad about it and he doesn't want to go, but imagine if Jeff started getting violent and aggressive due to this minor inconvenience. It would sell his eventual descent into madness really well. It would allow the reader to see him acting irrationally and realize that any little thing can set this kid into a violent rage. But the author does try to set up this violent anger in a different way, so let's get into that. Jeff started to talk, but stopped himself, knowing that he couldn't do anything. Whenever his mom said something, it was final. He walked up to his room and plopped down on his bed. He sat there looking at his ceiling when suddenly he got a feeling. Not so much a pain, but a weird feeling. He dismissed it as just some random feeling. He heard his mother call him down to get his stuff, and he walked down to get it. Now I know this feeling has been talked about a lot, and I'm not the first person to point out how funny this is, but it's seriously one of the strangest ways you could possibly set up Jeff's violent urges. And I think I might have a guess as to why the author wrote it this way. I think they may have been worried that it would be too obvious if they directly addressed the violence inside of Jeff. Their use of the word feeling is supposed to keep us guessing as to what is going on, but I think it would be better if Jeff's actual feelings were just looked at a little deeper. I'm fine with Jeff not understanding what feelings these are, but it would be nice to see him act on them sooner, like if he punched a hole in his wall or broke something. I know the author wants all of this to erupt from Jeff in one violent outburst, but even that eruption needs a more clear build-up for it to feel satisfying. There's a short story by David Lubar called All the Rage that's about a kid that never gets angry, and he is bullied and harassed by some other kids until he can't take it anymore. Then his stomach explodes and an oily, spiky rage monster with sharp claws attacks the kids that bullied him. It's a good example of a story that builds up the internal feelings of rage that a character is dealing with very quickly. The next day, Jeff walked downstairs to get breakfast and got ready for school. As he sat there, eating his breakfast, he once again got that feeling. Notice how Jeff goes down to eat breakfast and then got ready for school, which implies that we've moved past breakfast, but then immediately goes back to breakfast. It's a little clunky. This time it was stronger. It gave him a slight tugging pain, but he once again dismissed it. As he and Lou finished breakfast, they walked down to the bus stop. Should probably be after he and Lou finish breakfast, unless they're walking to the bus stop with their plates and cups in their hand. It's just a small little detail. Also, with all the breakfast talk, you'd think that Jeff the Killer is actually like Walter Jr. They sat there waiting for the bus stop, and then, all of a sudden, some kid on a skateboard jumped over them, only inches above their laps. They both jumped back in surprise. Hey, what the heck? Impressive ollie skills on this kid, honestly. It took me a full 2 months to even ollie an inch off the ground consistently, and this kid is pulling 2 or 3 foot ollies on command. The kid landed and turned back to them. He kicked his skateboard up and caught it with his hands. The kid seems to be about 12, 1 year younger than Jeff. He wears an Aeropostale shirt and ripped blue jeans. Remember earlier when I said that the story switches between not describing things and then describing things a little too much? This was the line I was thinking of. The fact that this bully is specified as wearing an Aeropostale shirt is such a funny little detail, and again, it lends itself to the theory that this was written by a pretty young author. I don't know if Aeropostale is really even still around anymore. I'm pretty sure they are, but they're certainly less popular than I remember them being when I was in middle and high school. But this story was written during what I experienced to be the height of Aeropostale as a brand. I had an Aeropostale shirt and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. If you're maybe a little bit younger than I am and you didn't read this story when it was at the height of its popularity, then this might not be as funny to you, but it's such a perfect time capsule for me. A skater kid with ripped jeans and an Aeropostale shirt is the epitome of the late 2000s, early 2010s stereotypical cool kid bully. Well, 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 looks like we got some new meat. Suddenly 2 other kids appeared. One was super skinny and the other was huge. Well, since you're new here, I'd like to introduce ourselves. Over there is Keith. Jeff and Lou looked over to the skinny kid. He had a dopey face that you would expect a sidekick to have. What a legendary description. Why bother letting us clue into the social dynamic of these kids when we can just say that one of them looks like a sidekick? What's funny is that I think that description could maybe work if it was talking about the ringleader of the operation. It would still be on the nose, but it would be a little better. If you describe the leader as looking like a sidekick, then there's some more thought that the reader can give into that particular description. It might make you wonder why that person is the one in charge. What about them makes them the leader? If it isn't their physical appearance, then there might be something else going on. But to describe a sidekick character as simply looking like a sidekick does nothing for the reader's imagination. And he's Troy. They looked over at the fat kid. Talk about a tub of lard. This kid looked like he hadn't exercised since he was crawling. I'm not saying that you can't describe a villain character as fat. There are lots of great villains where their size is an integral part of their character and it doesn't feel mean-spirited. Having a gluttonous villain is a pretty standard trope that speaks to their overindulgence and lack of restraint, typically while the people below them are suffering and starved. But to just call this kid a tub of lard and say that he hasn't exercised since he was crawling just comes out of nowhere and feels needlessly brutal even for a villain character. I think this description could actually work if this were written entirely from Jeff's point of view. I actually think the story would just work way better in general if it was first person. But this story isn't in first person. This is just the omniscient narrator taking the time to dunk on a fat kid to the audience for no reason, but that also makes it so funny. This is the moment where the story really starts to get so bad that it's good for me. The beginning is just kind of like a little dull with some minor issues, but now it's just hilarious. "And I," said the first kid, "am Randy. Now, for all the kids in this neighborhood, there is a small price for bus fare. If you catch my drift." Lou stood up, ready to punch the light out of the kid's eyes when one of his friends pulled a knife on him. Again, we have these kids speaking way too formally. What 12-year-old American kid is going to say there is a small price to pay for bus fare? My assumption is that the author wanted their story to sound more sophisticated, so they made the dialogue a little bit wordier and more proper, but this dialogue isn't the place to do that. You can have a story that sounds sophisticated and like a proper piece of literature with the dialogue being simplistic, especially if you're writing about children. Again, this is something that To Kill a Mockingbird does really well. The child characters speak like children, but the narration is beautifully written and it makes the story what it is. If you want to increase the reading level of your story about children, then those efforts should be funneled into the narration and description, and your dialogue should be a lot simpler. Also, Lou gets weirdly violent out of nowhere here despite not having a single character trait that's been established before this point. I think he could have been set up as violent beforehand. The violence inside of Lou actually becomes an important plot point going forward, so it would have been nice to see a little more context for Lou's immediate urge to hurt people. It could have played well with Jeff's growing inner violence if we had gotten a scene of like the two of them maybe wrestling, and maybe Lou is known for taking things too far and hurting Jeff. And then we could start seeing that violence bubbling up inside of Jeff, and maybe he would retaliate against Lou disproportionately by like breaking his finger or something. That way we would see that Lou is known to resort to violence quickly, but Jeff is the stronger of the two and has, up until recently, kept his violent urges in check. Also, pulling a knife on Lou is an insane move. Maybe if this was set pretty far into the past then I could see it, but knife violence from children in a rich neighborhood in 2010's America is a little out of place. Tisk tisk tisk. I'd hoped you would be more cooperative, but it seems we must do this the hard way. The kid walked up to Lou and took his wallet out of his pocket. I'm just now realizing that I've always pictured the main bully, Randy, as being Linus from Shark Boy and Lava Girl. It fits so well. Jeff got that feeling again. Now, it was truly strong. A burning sensation. He stood up, but Lou gestured at him to sit down. Jeff ignored him and walked up to the kid. "Listen here, you little punk. Give back my bro's wallet or else." Randy put the wallet in his pocket and pulled out his own knife. I don't know if I've ever referred to any of my brothers as my bros. I've used that word a lot to describe like my friends, but never my actual siblings. Maybe that's just me though. "Oh, and what will you do?" Just as he finished the sentence, Jeff popped the kid in the nose. As Randy reached for his face, Jeff grabbed the kid's wrist and broke it. Here's another instance where more descriptive language would improve the story. Did Jeff like twist Randy's wrist back? Because it kind of sounds like he just squeezed it and shattered it. Which could be a cool angle if Jeff were set up in any way to be unnaturally strong, but all we know about Jeff the Killer is that a young child successfully fended him off. Randy screamed and Jeff grabbed the knife from his hand. Troy and Keith rushed Jeff, but Jeff was too quick. He threw Randy to the ground. Keith lashed out at him, but Jeff ducked and stabbed him in the arm. Keith dropped his knife and fell to the ground screaming. Troy rushed him too, but Jeff didn't even need the knife. He punched Troy straight in the stomach and Troy went down. As he fell, he puked all over. Lou could do nothing but look in amazement at Jeff. I promise I'm going to stop bringing this up so much, but Jeff could have really used these skills when going toe-to-toe with a small child that he snuck up on in his bed. "Jeff, how'd you," was all he said. They saw the bus coming and knew they'd be blamed for the whole thing, so they started running as fast as they could. As they ran, they looked back and saw the bus driver rushing over to Randy and the others. As Jeff and Lou made it to school, they didn't dare tell what happened. All they did was sit and listen. Kind of hilarious that Jeff and Lou have this life-altering violent encounter that they know they'll be blamed for, and they still decide just to go to school as if they won't be caught. That's another hint as to the age of the author. The idea that skipping a day of school is like the worst thing you could do. Just don't show up. Keep running if you know you'll be punished. Jeff just thought of that as his brother beating up a few kids. But Jeff knew it was more. Referring to the whole situation as that is kind of awkward and confusing. It's a weirdly informal way to describe a violent encounter that doesn't fit with the narration style the author is using. It was something scary. As he got that feeling, he felt how powerful it was. The urge to just hurt someone. He didn't like how it sounded, but he couldn't help feeling happy. He felt that strange feeling go away and stay away for the entire day of school. Even as he walked home due to the whole thing near the bus stop, and how now he probably wouldn't be taking the bus anymore, he felt happy. Jeff, that whole thing at the bus stop was you shattering a kid's wrist and then stabbing another kid. It's like Jeff and Lou are both acutely aware of the consequences of their actions, but also completely oblivious to them at the same time. When he got home, his parents asked him how his day was, and he said, in a somewhat ominous voice, "It was a wonderful day." We love ourselves a good, ominous voice. The next morning, he heard a knock at his front door. He walked down to find 2 police officers at the door, his mother looking back at him with an angry look. "Jeff, these officers tell me that you attacked 3 kids, that it wasn't regular fighting, and that they were stabbed." "Stabbed, son?" Jeff's gaze fell to the floor, showing his mother that it was true. I actually like that last detail of Jeff's mom knowing that it was true just based on Jeff's body language. It really shows that Jeff's mom understands her children. She clearly knows almost everything about them and can tell exactly what's going on in their lives. She knows her children too well for them to be able to trick her. That's nice. "Mom, they were the ones who pulled the knives on me and Lou." "Son," said one of the cops, "we found 3 kids, 2 stabbed, and 1 having a bruise on his stomach, and we have witnesses proving that you fled the scene. Now what does that tell us?" But Jeff knew it was no use. He could say him and Lou had been attacked, but then there was no proof it was not them who attacked first. They couldn't say that they weren't fleeing because, truth be told, they were. So Jeff couldn't defend himself or Lou. Okay, how about this? Those kids are clearly neighborhood bullies. They said that all of the kids have to pay them for the bus fare, so why not just ask another kid in the neighborhood? We have a trio of skateboarding, cartoonishly evil middle school bullies that I'm positive have messed with other kids before, so it shouldn't be that hard to prove that they were the aggressors. "Son, call your brother." Jeff couldn't do it since it was he who beat up all the kids. "Sir, it was me. I was the one who beat up the kids. Lou tried to hold me back, but he couldn't stop me." The cop looked at his partner and they both nod. That last sentence is a perfect example of what I said earlier about the tenses not agreeing with each other. They should have both nodded, or it should have been said that the first cop looks at his partner. "Well, kid, looks like a year in juvie." The justice system moves at breakneck speed in this unnamed rich neighborhood. "Wait," says Lou. They all looked up to see him holding a knife. The officers pulled their guns and locked them on Lou. Keep in mind that Lou is probably like 9 or 10 years old and lives in an affluent neighborhood. He is standing far outside of stabbing range and isn't threatening anyone, but the cops just point their guns at him regardless. "It was me. I beat up those little punks. Have the marks to prove it." He lifted up his sleeves to reveal cuts and bruises, as if he was in a struggle. "Son, just put the knife down," said the officer. Lou held up the knife and dropped it to the ground. He put his hands up and walked over to the cops. "No, Lou, it was me. I did it." Jeff had tears running down his face. "Huh, poor bro. Trying to take the blame for what I did. Well, take me away." The police led Lou out to the patrol car. This is such an odd direction for the plot to go in. I get that they're setting Jeff up to be really angry at the kids who got Lou sent to juvie, but it just feels so out of place in this story. The author can't decide whether Jeff should be this insane, wild, unhinged killer with super strength, or someone who sticks up for his little brother and deeply cares for him. "Lou, tell them it was me. Tell them. I was the one who beat up the kids." Jeff's mother put her hands on his shoulders. "Jeff, please, you don't have to lie. We know it's Lou. You can stop." So Jeff's mom doesn't actually know her kids all that well after all. She can't tell that Lou is clearly taking the fall for Jeff. What happened there? Again, if Lou had been set up as the more violent one and Jeff was the more reserved one, then this would make more sense, but Lou doesn't have any sort of personality at all. In fact, pretty much none of the characters have any personality besides the bullies being stereotypical villains. Jeff also just gets that funny feeling sometimes, so that's all we know about him. The most expression we've seen in this story so far was when Troy was described as a tub of lard, and that wasn't even any of the characters saying that, it was just the author. Jeff watched helplessly as the cop car speeds off with Lou inside. A few minutes later, Jeff's dad pulled into the driveway, seeing Jeff's face and knowing something was wrong. Son, what is it?" Jeff couldn't answer. His vocal cords were strained from crying. Instead, Jeff's mother walked his father inside to break the bad news to him as Jeff wept in the driveway. After an hour or so, Jeff walked back into the house, seeing that his parents were both shocked, sad, and disappointed. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't see how they thought of Lou when it was his fault. Honestly, Jeff, I get you. I don't know why they think it's him either. Also, that was a kind of awkwardly phrased last sentence, but it does technically make sense. He just went to sleep, trying to get the whole thing off his mind. 2 days went by with no word from Lou at JDC, no friends to hang out with, nothing but sadness and guilt. Again, they just took Lou to juvie with no trial or anything. He hasn't even been allowed to see his family. I'm sure that's made Jeff's entire family very sad and mournful. That is until Saturday. when Jeff is woken up by his mother with a happy, sunshiny face. "Jeff, it's the day," she said as she opened up the curtains and let the light flood in. Am I missing something? Were Jeff's parents trying to get rid of Lou for like a long time? They seem to be pretty happy now that he's gone. Maybe Lou was a violent menace. I just wish the story would tell us. What's today?" asked Jeff as he stirs awake. "Why, it's Billy's party." He was now fully awake. "Mom, you're joking, right? You don't expect me to go to some kid's party after..." There was a long pause. Again, the soon-to-be insane serial killer Jeff seems to be the only character in the story that actually makes some sort of sense with the way that he talks and acts. "Jeff, we both know what happened. I think this party could be the thing that brightens up the past days. Now, get dressed." Jeff's mother walked out of the room and downstairs to ready herself. He fought himself to get up. He picked out a random shirt and pair of jeans and walked downstairs. He saw his mother and father all dressed up, his mother in a dress and his father in a suit. He thought, why they would ever wear such fancy clothes to a kid's party. This well and truly feels like the story is getting ready for some crazy twist. Like maybe the parents are preparing for some meeting with like a secret organization. Maybe they're all dressed up because the neighborhood is celebrating the day that they will mutilate Jeff and turn him into the deranged serial killer. That could be an interesting angle. "Son, is that all you're going to wear?" said Jeff's mom. "Better than wearing too much," he said. His mother pushed down the feeling to yell at him and hit it with a smile. Maybe I'm giving Jeff too hard of a time. If my parents wore dress clothes to a birthday party for a 12-year-old boy and then insisted that I do the same, I would also go crazy. "I don't have any fancy clothes," he yelled downstairs. "Just pick out something," called his mother. He looked around in his closet for what he would call fancy. He found a pair of black dress pants he had for special occasions and an undershirt. He couldn't find a shirt to go with it though. He looked around and only found striped and patterned shirts, none of which go with dress pants. Finally, he found a white hoodie and put it on. I love Jeff's fashion sense. He knows enough to think that a striped shirt wouldn't go well with his black dress pants, but then he just wears a white hoodie over everything instead. I'm not sure if Jeff the Killer's iconic outfit was first invented in this story, or if it was known beforehand, but I like to think this is the moment where we're supposed to be hyped. It's like in a superhero movie when we see the first time the hero wears his iconic outfit from the comics, only in this case it's just black dress pants and a white hoodie. "You're wearing that?" they both said. His mother looked at her watch. "Oh, no time to change. Let's just go," she said as she herded Jeff and his father out of the door. They crossed the street over to Barbara and Billy's house. They knocked at the door and at it appeared that Barbara, just like his parents, way overdressed. As they walked inside, all Jeff could see were adults, no kids. I have to reread what might be the most awkward sentence in this story, although there's another one later on that's pretty awkward. It says, "They knocked at the door and at it appeared that Barbara, just like his parents, way overdressed." "The kids are out in the yard. Jeff, how about you go meet some of them?" said Barbara. Jeff walked outside to a yard full of kids. They were running around in weird cowboy costumes and shooting each other with plastic guns. He might as well be standing in a Toys R Us. Suddenly a kid came to him and handed him a toy gun and hat. "Hey, wanna play?" he said. Because I criticized the story earlier for this, now I have to acknowledge when it does it correctly. That is dialogue that actually sounds like it was said by a real child. I'm honestly shocked that the little kid doesn't just come up and say something like, "It is henceforth the time to engage in such merriment as gallivanting around the yard and pretending to be the boys of cows of old." Ah, no kid, I'm way too old for this stuff. The kid looked at him with that weird puppy dog face. "Please," said the kid. "Fine," said Jeff. He put on the hat and started to pretend shoot at the kids. At first, he thought it was totally ridiculous. But then he started to actually have fun. It might not have been super cool, but it was the first time he had done something that took his mind off of Lou. So he played with the kids for a while until he heard a noise, a weird rolling noise. Then it hit him. Randy, Troy, and Keith all jumped over the fence on their skateboards. Describing the sound of skateboards as a weird rolling noise is needlessly vague. You could probably just say that you heard the sound of skateboards and most people would understand. Jeff dropped the fake gun and ripped off the hat. Randy looked at Jeff with a burning hatred. "Hello, Jeff, is it?" he said. "We have some unfinished business." Jeff saw his bruised nose. "I think we're even. I beat the crap out of you, and you get my brother sent to JDC. We get the mention of Randy's bruised nose, but the story never addresses the fact that his wrist is also broken. That seems like it should be the more obvious sign of their previous fight. Randy got an angry look in his eyes. "Oh no, I don't go for even. I go for winning. You may have kicked our butts that one day, but not today. As he said that, Randy rushed at Jeff. "I don't go for even, I go for winning" is such a legendary line, something no one has ever said before, and no one will probably ever say again. They both fell to the ground. Randy punched Jeff in the nose, no doubt with his non-broken wrist, again they haven't addressed that, and Jeff grabbed him by the ears and headbutted him. Jeff pushed Randy off of him and both rose to their feet. Kids were screaming and parents were running out of the house. Troy and Keith pulled guns out of their pockets. If we didn't know this story took place in America before, we certainly know now. These are literally 12-year-old kids with guns. Why does this story escalate so quickly? "No one interrupts or guts will fly," they said. Randy pulled a knife on Jeff and stabbed it into his shoulder. This is so ridiculous that it really feels like there should be a final twist where the parents orchestrated this whole thing or something like that. It's so far removed from reality at this point. And also, keep in mind that nothing even remotely scary has happened since the opening paragraph. This is supposed to be a creepypasta, but it's really not that creepy at all. A couple of violent kids can be a really scary concept. There's a movie called Wolf Creek that explores that idea very well. Children of the Corn also does the same thing. But those stories feel somewhat grounded, although Children of the Corn does have like a supernatural element to it. But they're scary because they could conceivably happen to anyone. The dialogue here is just so ridiculous that nothing about this situation feels real. Jeff screamed and fell to his knees. Randy started kicking him in the face. After 3 kicks, Jeff grabs his foot and twists it, causing Randy to fall to the ground. Jeff stood up and walked towards the back door. Troy grabbed him. "Need some help?" He picks Jeff up by the back of the collar and throws him through the patio door. As Jeff tries to stand, he is kicked down to the ground. Randy repeatedly starts kicking Jeff until he starts to cough up blood. "Come on, Jeff, fight me." He picks up Jeff and throws him into the kitchen. Randy sees a bottle of vodka on the counter and smashes the glass over Jeff's head. So now we have Randy like literally taunting him like the Joker. He also manages to pick Jeff up and throw him, which is pretty impressive given his recently broken wrist. Keep in mind that none of the adults are even trying to stop what is happening. I get that Keith and Troy have guns, but it would be nice to hear them yelling at the kids to stop fighting, or maybe someone just like calling the police. "Fight!" He throws Jeff back into the living room. "Come on, Jeff, look at me." Jeff glances up, his face riddled with blood. "I was the one who got your brother sent to JDC, and now you're just gonna sit here and let him rot in there for a whole year? You should be ashamed." Jeff starts to get up. A year in juvie would suck. That's a long time if you're a kid, especially when you didn't do anything and didn't even get any sort of trial before you got shipped off there. But to use the phrase "let him rot" when referring to a single year of juvie is kind of funny. "Oh, finally, you stand and fight." Jeff is now to his feet, blood and vodka on his face. Once again, he gets that strange feeling, the one he hasn't felt in a while. And by a while, I think we mean like maybe a week, maybe just a couple days. Jeff previously got this feeling at the most minor of inconveniences, even before he was actually in any danger. So it's kind of funny that the feeling waits to kick in until after he's been completely brutalized by Randy. "Finally, he's up," says Randy as he runs at Jeff. That's when it happens. Something inside Jeff snaps. His psyche is destroyed. All rational thinking is gone. All he can do is kill. Oh yeah, the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time for Jeff to become that insane killer that we saw at the beginning. Let's see what he can do. He grabs Randy and pile drives him to the ground. He gets on top of him and punches him straight in the heart. The punch causes Randy's heart to stop. That's absolutely insane. Literally stops his heart with a single punch. You think the 2 kids with guns would step in here and put a stop to Jeff killing their dear leader? As Randy gasps for breath, Jeff hammers down on him. Punch after punch, blood gushes from Randy's body until he takes one final breath and dies. Everyone is looking at Jeff now. The parents, the crying kids, even Troy and Keith, although they easily break from their gaze and point their guns at Jeff. So Troy and Keith could see Jeff killing Randy, but they just decided to let him finish the job before trying to do anything to stop him. Typical sidekick behavior. Jeff sees the guns trained on him and runs for the stairs. As he runs, Troy and Keith let out fire on him, each shot missing. This is actually a pretty realistic detail. Chances are those kids would miss their shots since they're literal children after all. Jeff runs up the stairs. He hears Troy and Keith follow up behind. As they let out their final rounds of bullets, Jeff ducks into the bathroom. He grabs a towel rack and rips it off the wall. Troy and Keith race in, knives ready. Troy swings his knife at Jeff, who backs away and bangs the towel rack into Troy's face. Troy goes down hard, and now all that's left is Keith. He is more agile than Troy though, and ducks when Jeff swings the towel rack. He dropped the knife and grabbed Jeff by the neck. He pushed him into the wall. This next line is the entire reason that I wanted to make this particular video in the first place. It's so funny to me. A thing of bleach fell down on top of him from the top shelf. A thing of bleach. You can tell that at this point, the author was really excited with the action sequence that they were writing, and they just started rushing to the thrilling conclusion. Referring to a container as a thing of bleach is so funny to me, because that's exactly what I talked like when I was younger. It's so vague, but I know exactly what the author means. It burnt both of them, and they both started to scream. Jeff wiped his eyes as best as he could. He pulled back the towel rack and swung it straight into Keith's head. As he lay there, bleeding to death, he let out an ominous smile. Kind of funny to say he let out a smile and not just like he had an ominous smile, also ominous again. What's so funny? Asked Jeff. Keith pulled out a lighter and switched it on. What's funny, he said, is that you're covered in bleach and alcohol. Jeff's eyes widened as Keith threw the lighter at him. As soon as the flame made contact with him, the flames ignited the alcohol in the vodka. While the alcohol burned him, the bleach bleached his skin. Jeff let out a terrible screech as he caught on fire. He tried to roll out the fire, but it was no use. The alcohol made him a walking inferno. It's always been weird to me that the bleach just turns his face a complete ghostly white color. That can't be how that works, right? Wouldn't it just like burn the skin off of his face? He ran down the hall and fell down the stairs. Everybody started screaming as they saw Jeff, now a man on fire, drop to the ground, nearly dead. The last thing Jeff saw was his mother and the other parents trying to extinguish the flame. That's when he passed out. That's the end of our thrilling action sequence. We've got 3 dead kids, one of which was killed by a single punch to the chest that stopped his heart, and our poor burn victim, Jeff. Action is hard to write. I can never connect super well to fight scenes in books nearly as well as I can when I see them on screen, and I actually don't think this fight scene is terrible. I can almost picture exactly what happens during the fight. The descriptions are good. The issue is that what happens doesn't make a ton of sense. There are no plot holes, it's just a nonsensical plot. When Jeff woke up, he had a cast wrapped around his face. He couldn't see anything, but he felt a cast on his shoulder and stitches all over his body. He tried to stand up, but he realized there was some tube in his arm, and when he tried to get up, it fell out, and a nurse rushed in. "I don't think you can get out of bed just yet," she said as she put him back in his bed and reinserted the tube. Jeff sat there with no vision, no idea what his surroundings were. Finally, after hours, he heard his mother. So Jeff has been brutalized and presumably on the verge of death in the hospital, and it still takes his mom hours to show up after he finally wakes up? What a horrible mother. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked. Jeff couldn't answer though. His face was covered and he was unable to speak. I'm going to hazard a guess and say that Jeff isn't okay. "Oh honey, I have great news. After all the witnesses told the police that Randy confessed of trying to attack you, they decided to let Lou go." So presumably that's the reason why Randy says like out loud like, "I'm the one who sent your brother to JDC," because then like later in the story, they can be like, "Oh, everybody heard him confess that." And also, the police were more than willing to shoot and kill a tiny kid like Lou, and then immediately took him to juvie on his word alone. But when 3 kids end up dead at a party, they immediately decide that Lou should be let go? You think they would remember that Jeff confessed to the crimes and then connect that with the fact that Jeff killed 3 other kids and maybe follow up on that lead, but no. This made Jeff almost bolt up, stopping halfway, remembering the tube coming out of his arm. He'll be out by tomorrow, and then you two will be able to be together again. Jeff's mother hugs Jeff and says her goodbyes. She's leaving? She checked on her burn victim, stab victim, broken-bodied son after hours of him waiting for like 30 seconds, and then she's out of there? Maybe Jeff's parents have another fancy 10-year-old birthday party to go to, I don't know. The next couple weeks were those when Jeff was visited by his family. Super awkward phrasing there as well that feels like it came straight out of the book Piranesi if you've read that. All of like the chapter headings sound like that. Really weird reference, but amazing book. You should read that instead of Jeff the Killer. Then came the day where his bandages were to be removed. His family members were all there to see it, what he would look like. As the doctors unwrapped the bandages from Jeff's face, everyone was on the edge of their seats. They waited until the last bandage holding the cover over his face was almost removed. "Let's hope for the best," said the doctor. Imagine you are a burn victim. That is one of the most horrifying things that you could possibly go through. You know that your appearance will be permanently altered forever. You would hope that your family wouldn't be sitting around you to see the final result of your deformed face, and that your doctor wouldn't hit you with the "let's hope for the best." What do you mean, let's hope for the best? It's your job to know everything about Jeff's condition. You should have an idea of what his face will look like. He quickly pulls the cloth, letting the rest fall from Jeff's face. Yeah, nice. Not delicate at all. He rips the cover off of Jeff's burn victim face. Jeff's mother screams at the sight of his face. Lou and Jeff's dad stare awestruck at his face. Awestruck is such a funny word to use in a horrifying situation like this. I know it's not technically wrong, but it just sounds so funny. Also, it's a little clunky to end 2 sentences in a row with his face. What? What happened to my face?" Jeff said. He rushed out of bed and ran to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror and saw the cause of the distress. His face, it's horrible. Who's saying it's horrible? Is the narrator coming back in with a weird amount of personality? It seems like it's Jeff, but the next paragraph seemingly disproves that theory that he would think his face looks horrible. His lips were burnt to a deep shade of red. His face was turned into a pure white color, and his hair singed from brown to black. He slowly put his hand to his face. It had a sort of leathery feel to it now. He looked back at his family, then back at the mirror. I hadn't picked up on this till recording, but I wonder, because it says his face had a leathery feel to it, I wonder if that's supposed to be a reference to Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's kind of cool if that's the case. Another iconic slasher villain. Jeff, said Lou, it's not that bad. Not that bad, said Jeff. It's perfect. His family was equally surprised. Jeff started laughing uncontrollably. His parents notices that his left eye and hand were twitching. Sorry for the awkward reading on that one. The author just completely gave up on even trying to have any sort of correct punctuation during that last paragraph. It was a massacre. Jeff, are you okay? Okay, I've never felt more happy. Ha, 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 ha. Look at me. It seems like the author realized they forgot a ton of punctuation with the paragraph before and tried to make up for it by putting a comma in between each ha. That's why I read it that way. Also, this is where the story gets like actually cringy in my opinion. I know that so much of this story has been pretty cringy so far, but the edgy, insane, happy Jeff just puts me over the edge. This face goes perfectly with me. He couldn't stop laughing. He stroked his face feeling it, looking at it in the mirror. What caused this? The story has been really good so far, but I really just wish we had a moment where the narrator spoke directly to us like Bill Nye the Science Guy. Just wish we had something like that. What caused this? Well, you may recall that when Jeff was fighting Randy, something in his mind, his sanity, snapped. Now he was left as a crazy killing machine. That is, his parents didn't know. Looks like my wish was granted. What am I supposed to say, guys? What is there left to say about this story that I haven't covered already? You know that last sentence didn't make any sense. You know that is his parents didn't know doesn't make any sense. You know this already. Let's just finish this thing out. Doctor, said Jeff's mom, is my son all right, you know, in the head? This might be something you'd want to address with the doctor in private and not in front of your burn victim son. Oh yes, this behavior is typical for patients that have taken a very large amount of painkillers. If his behavior doesn't change in a few weeks, bring him back here and we'll give him a psychological test. Oh, thank you, doctor. Jeff's mother went over to Jeff. Jeff, sweetie, it's time to go. Give that doctor the Year Award, the Doctor of the Century Award. Just give it to him. He deserves it. Jeff looks away from the mirror. His face still formed into a crazy smile. "'Kay, mommy, ha, ha, ha." His mother took him by the shoulder and took him to get his clothes. I want to think that she didn't take him by the shoulder that he got stabbed in, but knowing Jeff's mom, that's probably exactly what she did. This is what came in, the lady at the desk said. Jeff's mom looked down to see the black dress pants and white hoodie her son wore. Now they were clean of blood and now stitched together. Why wouldn't his parents bring him a new set of clothes? Why does he have to leave in the same clothes he came in with? What is going on? Jeff's mother led him to his room and made him put his clothes on. Then they left, not knowing that this was their final day of life. I know that it's referring to Jeff's entire family, but the way that it's written makes it sound like both Jeff and his mother's final day of life, but who cares? Later that night, Jeff's mother woke to a sound coming from the bathroom. It sounded as if someone was crying. She slowly walked over to see what it was. When she looked into the bathroom, she saw a horrendous sight. Jeff had taken a knife and carved a smile into his cheeks. "Jeff, what are you doing?" asked his mother. Jeff looked over to his mother. "I couldn't keep smiling, Mommy. It hurt after a while. Now I can smile forever." Jeff's mother noticed his eyes, ringed and black. "Jeff, your eyes." His eyes were seemingly never closing. Another really weird description there. "I couldn't see my face. I got tired and my eyes started to close. I burned out the eyelids so I could forever see myself, my new face." Jeff's mother slowly started to back away, seeing that her son was going insane. "What's wrong, Mommy? Aren't I beautiful?" It's so edgy. It's just so edgy. I can't take it anymore. "Yes, son," she said. "Yes, you are. Let me go get Daddy so he can see your face." She ran into the room and shook Jeff's dad from his sleep. "Honey, get the gun. She stopped as she saw Jeff in the doorway, holding a knife. I know that a lot of people who read this story think that Jeff's mom asking her husband to get the gun comes out of nowhere, but it actually feels in character to me. She's been so callous and dismissive of pretty much everything regarding Jeff's tragic fate, so it doesn't shock me at all that she just wants to kill him now. It's more shocking that she doesn't just try to do it herself. "Mommy, you lied." That's the last thing they hear as Jeff rushed them with the knife, gutting both of them. His brother Lou woke up, thanks for specifying that Lou is his brother again for some reason, startled by some noise. He didn't hear anything else, so he just shut his eyes and tried to go back to sleep. As he was on the border of slumber, he got the strangest feeling that someone was watching him. Border of slumber just feels so out of place. Is Lou a vampire? Is he Mal'Ganis from Warcraft 3? He looked up before Jeff's hand covered his mouth. He slowly raised the knife, ready to plunge it into Lou. Lou thrashed here and there, trying to escape Jeff's grip. The phrasing of here and there makes it sound like Lou wasn't even putting up that much of a fight. He must not have, because we know about Jeff's difficulty overpowering small children. Shh, Jeff said, just go to sleep. And that is the end of Jeff the Killer. What an insane, hilarious, wild ride. It's wild to think this story scared me so much when I was younger. Hopefully you enjoyed this thorough look at this story. Like I said before, the author was probably very young, so I don't blame them for their quality of writing. And even some things are pretty decent in my opinion, like the descriptions of the fight scenes. While the fight scenes are very cringy, the actual description of fight choreography I think is pretty good and pretty easy to picture in your mind. I'm just so fascinated that this story became so famous despite its kind of poor quality. It's a testament to the power of the internet. Like I said, everyone has to start somewhere when it comes to writing. Fortunately, most people's first works won't live on in infamy forever on the internet. What's interesting to me is that I suspect this was the first or one of the first Jeff the Killer stories to be written, and that's why it became so famous. The picture is creepy, and it's no wonder that it became such an icon of internet horror, but when you have a creepy concept or picture, people will naturally want to make more content about it. It's like how the Backrooms started with a single spooky image and some cryptic text, and it was this cool, spooky, mysterious thing. And then the internet got a hold of it and started adding their own mythology about the thousands of layers of the Backrooms, the tips and tricks you need to get through them. And then when Saul Goodman was presenting his oral arguments against Sandpiper Crossing, he no-clipped through reality and fell into the Backrooms, and now he lives there. What's interesting is that with these concepts that are born on the internet, there's really no concept of the original creator. Slenderman was created by Victor Surge, but the idea is so much bigger than he probably ever thought it would be. And sometimes you just make something mostly for yourself and it just blows up. I'm actually really glad that this is the story associated with Jeff the Killer, because there could have been a super generic story that got associated with that image, something totally serviceable but pretty boring. Even the idea that I suggested at the start of it being almost like a found footage, people keep seeing this killer and then we get a picture of him, that's more generic than what we get with this story. So luckily we were given something completely unforgettable and completely hilarious. Because the story is a lot of things, it's written really weird, it's got kind of poor grammar and writing and sentence structure, it's got weird characters that don't talk like they should talk for being children, it's got insane violence, and it's needlessly edgy. But for all the things this story is, it certainly is not generic, and I kind of love it for that. Thank you all so much for watching me talk about this. This video ended up being way longer than I thought it would be when I started. If you're interested in more internet horror and horror literature content, then consider subscribing. I do a lot of that on this channel. If you're a fan of creepypasta, then I do have a video on both Borrasca and Pen Pal where I go through them and talk about why I think they work and why I think they don't work. Those videos are a ton of fun. I also have a creepypasta iceberg video where I go through 40 different creepypasta and give kind of long explanations for a lot of them, so it's a little bit more in-depth than a normal iceberg video. If you like SCP content, I have videos on both This Thing a Quiet Madness Made and You Do Not Recognize the Bodies in the Water, which are two of my favorite SCPs of all time. And if you're interested in horror literature or you want to read horror but you don't really know where to start, I have a video that I just made recently about a book called Disappearance at Devil's Rock where I go through the entire story that I think would be a lot of fun for you. It kind of has a similar format to this, but it's just obviously a lot less funny. I go more into the story and what works and what doesn't, and it's a really cool and interesting story and kind of creepy, so that would be a great video to check out as well. If you would like to support me further, then please consider becoming a channel member where you will get early access to all my videos, access to exclusive video book reviews, and access to my members only book club. A massive thank you to all my gold tier members: Amanda Mapes, Lucas Fernando, Chris Lamb, Ezra, Silent Trails, Blue Radio Media, Tyler the Leper, Vic's Corner, MissJoy16, Coco Boko, Cherry Shark, Saddest John, Moonsong Blog, Starlight Pink, Jack Samore, Amanda Castillon, Lexi, Arcade Link Author, Pyrocat, B, The Official Gar, Passion the Fruit, YBAB Flow, Hi, and Zappo-Dappos. Your support really does mean the world to me. This has been an amazing month for my channel, and I really do think I'll hit that 50,000 subscriber goal by the end of the year, maybe even before that, so I'm super stoked about that. Thank you everyone for watching this ominous video, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.